It's good to see so many of you from so many different countries. Amazing. My name is Jill Budgie and I'm a senior presenter for Cambridge ESOL and I'm the professional support leader for the speaking tests in the UK. So welcome to our webinar today on assessing speaking. To start, I'd like to give you some information about Cambridge Assessment and our assessment of speaking. Cambridge Assessment was established 150 years ago. We are an international exams group and a not-for-profit organisation. We're a department of Cambridge University comprising 3 exam boards, as well as the largest research capability of its kind. We advise governments and NGOs, and we partner industry leaders to deliver the best products and services. Recently, we've produced a volume in the Studies in Language Testing series called Examining Speaking, and you can see that on your screen now. This explores the assessment of speaking from different perspectives. These include, for example, the cognitive processes involved in speaking, characteristics of speaking tasks, scoring issues, and how to develop speaking tests with positive impact. This book is available to order from the CUP website. As you can see from the map, Cambridge ESOL has around 4 million candidates from all over the world. There are over 2,700 centres in 130 countries, with approximately 18,000 speaking examiners spread all over the world. Cambridge ESOL speaking tests are conducted by trained examiners, and the quality assurance of speaking examiners is managed by team leaders and regional team leaders, who are in turn responsible to a professional support leader, who is the professional representative of Cambridge ESOL for the speaking tests in a given country or region. All of the examiners, professional support leaders, regional team leaders and speaking examiners must prove each year through a certification process that they are competent to assess. In addition, they are regularly monitored during live testing sessions. In our session today, we're going to focus on different speaking test formats, and we'll explore in more detail the paired format. In the second half of the presentation, we will overview some implications for the classroom and give you some ideas for activities and materials you can use with your students. I would now like to introduce you to Evelina for the next part of this webinar.
So as Jill said, my name is Evelina Golozzi and I'm one of the principal research and validation managers at Cambridge ESOL. Once again, apologies for this, but it's always difficult with technology. So to go back, what we'll talk about today is the paired speaking format. But before we get to the paired format, let's look at just assessment of speaking in general and 2 of the most widespread formats in the assessment of speaking. And those 2 formats are called direct formats and semi-direct formats. And a direct format involves interaction with a human being, that's an examiner usually, or another test taker. A semi-direct format involves speech which is elicited by a machine. Let's look at direct speaking tests in a little bit more detail now. They involve usually 3 variations. They can be either individual, paired or group formats. In the individual there's 1 test taker, in the paired 2, and in the group usually 3 or 4 test takers, and usually they're scored by human raters. In a computer-based test, the test taker responds to a series of prompts delivered by a computer, and scoring can be done by a human rater or it can be done automatically by the machine. And some examples are, for example, the Cambridge tests are direct tests, and the TOEFL test or the Persian test of English academic are semi-direct tests. Okay, now let's look at direct formats and let's think a little bit about why they're important and why we think it's important to offer direct assessment of speaking. One of the key differences between direct and semi-direct assessment of speaking is that speaking ability in a direct test involves interaction and production. In other words, you're putting your knowledge of language into interaction with another human being, and in a semi-direct test there is only production involved. So there is no interaction and co-construction of meaning. So computer-based tests are unidirectional, and direct tests are multidirectional because you have the co-construction of interaction. And the tasks in a computer-based test are often monologic, where one speaker produces a turn as a response to the prompt. And something that is very important for you to note, and that's one of the main messages from today, is that there isn't just one way of testing speaking or a best way of testing speaking. Both the direct and indirect, the direct and semi-direct formats have their unique advantages and disadvantages, just like any test format. And so you have to address the disadvantages and optimize the advantages. And so the fundamental question becomes not whether a specific test is direct or semi-direct, but whether the test is valid for its purpose. And so let's look now at direct tests and see whether they're valid for their purpose. The traditional way of testing speaking has usually been a face-to-face direct format, which involves an individual test taker and an examiner. And they're usually engaged in a spontaneous or structured question and answer session. Now, the more we use a format, the more we can find out about it, and we know that there are advantages to this format, but also issues with the individual format. And one of the issues is that the range of tasks and the types of interaction is more restricted because it's an examiner asking questions of a candidate. And so there is unequal distribution of rights and responsibilities between the examiner and the candidate. So knowing that there are issues with this format, what is a solution? Well, the paired test format is a natural alternative to the individual format, the paired and the group format, because they create opportunities for peer-peer interaction, and that's a very important benefit of paired and group tests. And the last decade has seen a growth in the use of paired speaking tests. They've been used at Cambridge for more than 20 years, and their growth has been largely a response to the move towards a more communicative approach to language teaching, and a reaction to some of the limitations of the oral test format. Now let's take a look at the paired format, and let's look at some of its positive features. One of the positive features is the very strong relationship between teaching and testing, and the fact that the paired tests have positive washback or impact on teaching. So paired speaking tests encourage more pair work in the classroom, and at the same time they reflect what is already happening in the classroom. And that's a very strong symbiotic relationship between testing, teaching and learning, which I think tests need to try to benefit from. There is also theoretical support for paired speaking tests. Current theories of communicative language ability include a conversation management component, and conversation management really means the ability to manage conversation, and paired tests provide such opportunities for test takers to display a fuller range of their conversational competence because they put the burden, the responsibility of managing conversation on them in some of the tasks. And we believe that including such conversation management opportunities in a test provides more evidence of language proficiency. So paired tests provide more opportunities for more interactional symmetry as well, since they allow not just examiner-candidate and individual candidate talk, but also candidate-candidate interaction, or examiner-candidate-candidate interaction, and that's an additional feature of the paired speaking tests. Such theoretical and pedagogical considerations have played a key role in the widespread use of paired speaking test formats, so they have this theoretical and pedagogical benefit to them. But while the benefits of the paired format have been widely acknowledged, there is also a number of challenges that we have to address which are associated with the paired speaking test format. And one of the fundamental concerns is the complexity which speaking tests bring because of the uncontrolled variability which is inherent in paired assessment, because you have test takers coming in, which introduces much more variability in the test. Another fundamental issue inherent in paired tasks relates to the issue of interpreting individual scores based on jointly constructed interaction distributed among participants. So the test takers construct the interaction together, but they're given an individual score. Such issues with the nature of the paired test have led some researchers to question the fairness of the test, and they've said, well, is this a fair test? Now let's see what insights the available research on paired tests provides so we can judge the fairness of the test based on empirical findings. We're going to do a task so that you can look at features associated with speaking tests, and there will be statements which you have to decide whether they're true or false, and the statements are now on your screen. So there are 6 statements, and you need to decide if they're true or false by choosing a tick or a cross on the left-hand side of your screen. Let's look at the first statement. In a paired test, is it true or false that the test taker has more turns, more interactional turns? Is it true or false that in a paired test there are more interactional turns? You need to choose true, you need to choose a tick or a cross on the left of your screen. Okay, I see that a lot of you have chosen true, which is the case. The test taker has more turns in a paired test just because some of the tasks put the test taker give the test taker responsibility to manage the conversation, so the examiner is removed from that task. The turns might be shorter, but there are more of them. Let's look at the next one now. The test taker has more opportunities for initiating topics. And this means within the task, so the examiner would set a topic, but then the test taker can initiate topics within that and take the conversation where they want it to go. Is that true or false?
Recording in progress.
I agree. That is actually a true statement. The test taker has more opportunity to start topics because some of the tasks put the responsibility for developing the conversation on the test takers themselves. Let's look at number 3 together. There is more collaborative development of topics in a paired format. Is this true or false? Is there more collaborative development of topics in a paired format? What do you think? Yes, I see that a lot of you are saying true. And I agree with that. Some of the tasks ask the test takers to develop the interaction together, so they may be successful or not successful, but they need to work together collaboratively to develop topics. Let's look at number 4 now. There is more examiner talk in a paired format. Is this true or false? Yes, I see that a lot of you are saying false, and I agree with that. There is less examiner talk in a paired format because some of the tasks do not involve examiner talk at all, or they involve the examiner simply as a facilitator of that task. Let's look at number 5 now. The effect of background variables is higher in a paired format. Do you think this is true or false? And by this I mean, by background variables, I mean effects such as the English level of the different candidates, or their age, their gender, personality of the different candidates. What do you think? Does this have more effect in a paired format? Yes, I see that a lot of you are saying true, and I agree with that. There are some effects. There are more effects for background variables in a paired format, and we're going to look at this shortly. Finally, let's look at the last statement. There is more variety of speech functions in a paired format, and this means types of language for different uses. For example, agreeing or disagreeing, that's a speech function, or helping your partner with what they say, that's another speech function. Do you think there are more different speech functions in a paired format? True or false? I agree. I see a lot of truths. It's always good when we agree. Yes, paired tests have been found to provide more opportunities for test takers to display a wider range of their speech functions. And this range has been, for example, informational functions such as expressing an opinion, or interactional functions such as persuading, or managing the interaction functions such as initiating a topic or terminating a discussion, asking your partner questions. So these functions are found in an individual test except for the managing the interaction functions, which are unique to a paired speaking test. So let's summarize what I've said about paired tests so far. Research has shown that interaction in a paired format interaction demands more complex cognitive and strategic processes, and this in turn elicits a richer range of language, we have more speech functions that are tapped into, which allows for better inferences to be made about a candidate's proficiency in a wider real context. So you can make more accurate inferences about what they can do in real life contexts. Okay, now let's move on and let's look at background variables, which is one of the probably the biggest issue of paired speaking tests. This has been called in the academic literature the interlocutor effect. And the interlocutor effect means the systematic effect on performance of variables pertaining to the examiner or the peer interlocutor. And these are variables such as the proficiency level of the test takers, their personality, the level of acquaintanceship, which means their familiarity with each other, their cultural background, their age, their gender. So these effects play a role or could potentially play a role in paired speaking test. It's important to note, however, that the interlocutor effects are found both in individual and paired speaking tests, but they're easy to control in individual tests. So if we know that these variables could potentially play a role, an obvious question which emerges is, how influential are they? And we'll look now at research which is focused on their effect on discourse and their effect on the scores of test takers. We don't have much time today, so we're just going to look at 3 key background variables which are connected to paired speaking tests and their proficiency level, personality, and acquaintanceship, which is the level of familiarity. And I should say that I'm going to give you a very brief overview of these, but you'll be sent an article which I wrote, which summarizes all the research on these variables. So that's something for you to read, and I'll just quickly now summarize just main points. So overall, the research findings have been contradictory, and they've all shown that there is no direct predictable impact of these variables. So they work in different ways, and we can't say that one affects performance in a certain way. Let's look at proficiency level now. And what research has found is that there is some influence on conversation. So being matched with a higher proficiency partner can result in more talk. However, and this is important, talking more did not lead to higher scores necessarily. So there is some limited effect on proficiency level. Other research compared same proficiency level, compared groups that had same proficiency level candidates and different proficiency level candidates. And what this research found is that there are more similarities than differences between these two groups. So again, the finding was that there is limited role of proficiency level. Now, I have to say that, of course, when we talk about proficiency level, we don't mean wide divergence in proficiency level. That would be problematic, so there's some constraints. But when the proficiency level does not diverge too much, let's say intermediate with an advanced speaker, that the problem of proficiency level is it's limited. Let's look at personality now. And the research here has mainly focused on the level of extroversion and introversion of candidates. And some research has shown that that extroverted candidates benefit more from a paired speaking test, but the same researcher doing another study found that actually it's introverts who benefit from the paired speaking test. And so the lesson here was that there are contradictory findings, so it's not really just about personality. But the more important finding in this case was that when you look at task types and personality, you can come up with some conclusions. And the conclusion was that extroversion level of test takers influences performance related to certain task types. So introverts, for example, preferred structured, highly prompted tasks, and extroverts prefer a higher degree of freedom. So the lesson here is that you need a range of task types to minimize the effect of personality. Let's take a look at the acquaintanceship effect, which is the effect of familiarity. And again, the findings here are very mixed. One researcher found that there is some familiarity effect. So in other words, if test takers work with a friend, with someone they know, they achieve higher scores. However, the same researcher said it's not just about familiarity. It is also about the gender of those test takers, and it's about the cultural context they come from. And in his study, he based his study on Japanese female learners. In another study which we did in Cambridge last year, we focused on Swiss learners. And what we found is that there was no effect from familiarity in a Swiss context. So being paired with a friend, with someone you know, or with someone you don't know, didn't affect your scores in a significant way. And more importantly, the test takers told us that they don't have a preference for or against familiar partners. So the research on the role of the test taker background variables has produced contradictory findings, and there's no linear, clear-cut behavior based on background characteristics. So we can't say having a certain personality will affect your test in this way or that way. So key question, therefore, the key question I think shifts from do background variables play a role? We know that they play some role. The key question becomes what should we do about it? And so test developers need to decide whether to eliminate such variability altogether and not offer paired tests, or they have to decide how they can control for such variability. And Meryl Swain, who is one of the key people in language assessment, a very well-respected researcher, she argued, I think very wisely, that variability related to different characteristics of conversational partners is all that happens in the real world. And so there are things we should be interested in testing. And so coping successfully with such real-life interaction demands therefore becomes part of the construct of interactional competence and should have a role in paired tests. So paired tests allow us to test interactional competence, and that I think is a benefit. Now paired tests, just like other test formats, present both opportunities and challenges. I think there are more opportunities and fewer challenges. And the empirical studies have highlighted the test provider's empirical responsibility to construct tests which would be fair and will not provide differences and unequal treatment of candidates. So in other words, we would optimize the benefits and minimize the challenges. And the way we at Cambridge deal with this is to provide a multi-part paired tests, which tap into different types of talk, such as candidate-examiner, that's one type of task, candidate-candidate, that's another type of task, candidate-candidate examiner, a third type of task, and candidate only. So the paired aspect of the paired part of the test is present in some of the tasks only. And this, I think, optimizes the benefits of the paired format while it controls for possible limitations. Other aspects of using paired tests responsibly include the use of analytical and global criteria for the raters, which focus holistically on discourse as well as on microlinguistic features. I think also including rigorous procedures for training and monitoring examiners is another aspect of using paired speaking tests responsibly. Now let's take a look. I've talked a lot about paired tests. Let's take a look at some speaking tests which are offered by Cambridge, and you see a list on your screen on the slide. There are some of our classical general English tests, for example, proficiency, advanced, first, preliminary, and key. Also on the list you can see the Cambridge English for Young Learners, the IELTS test, and the Cambridge English for Business certificates. Now try to think and decide which of these Cambridge ESO tests do not use a paired format, and why not. Just take a few seconds. I see a lot of you saying that IELTS and Young Learners don't use a paired speaking format, and I agree with that. And that's what you see on your next slide. Now let's think a little bit about why IELTS doesn't use a paired format. Well, the IELTS test spans a wide range of proficiency levels, and so would be unsuitable for a paired format, since there is the potential for pairing two candidates who have widely divergent proficiency levels. And so that would make the test unfair. In the case of tests for young learners, a paired test would be unsuitable since learners younger than 12 years of age may not have the strong interactional skills even in their first language, so asking them to manage interaction in a second language would be unfair. And so just to wrap up this research bit of the presentation, I think key questions which you need to ask yourselves as teachers or researchers or test users when deciding on a language test are, is the test fit for purpose? Is it fair? And does it have positive impact? And I hope that I've answered some of these questions in the context of the paired tests. Now I'm going to hand you over to Jill, who is going to discuss the implications of what we've discussed for the classroom.
Thank you, Evelina. So, as Evelina has said, most Cambridge speaking tests use a paired format and a variety of interaction types. How does this affect what you do as teachers in your classrooms? We're going to look a bit more now at the practical side. Well, firstly, students need to be supported with appropriate materials and activities which develop their collaborative skills, as they're not necessarily going to automatically develop these types of interactive communication skills on their own. And suitable classroom practice is needed, which gives students experience with task-based learning in groups and pairs, and helps them to build their collaborative skills, both for the speaking test and as a life skill. Before we can discuss how to develop collaborative skills, let's just make sure we all understand what is meant by the term. So what do you think is included in the term collaborative skills? Please type your ideas in the text chat box now. Yeah, thank you. There's some really good ideas there. Teamwork, problem solving, responding, making decisions, all of those things, yes. So thank you very much. So firstly, let's just draw those ideas together. Firstly, topic development is part of collaborative skills. Students need to be able to expand on their own topics and on those of their partner. They can do this by referring to what their partner has just said or by asking relevant questions. It's also important that there is equality in topic development. That's to say that both candidates contribute in equal measures. And as many of you have mentioned as well, turn-taking is a very important collaborative skill and one that can be difficult for many students. Turn-taking includes initiating and responding to what others say and linking contributions to other speakers. We'll look at some examples of this later. And yes, again, as some of you have said, interactive listening is a vital collaborative skill. Despite candidates being tested mainly on their speaking, we don't speak in isolation, and in a paired format where collaborative skills are tested, good listening skills are also important. Candidates should be able to demonstrate that they have listened interactively by responding appropriately to questions and making reference to what their partner has said. And finally, speaker nomination also comes under collaborative skills. Speakers can nominate their partner, for example, by asking a question, such as, "What do you think?" And they can also nominate themselves, perhaps by interjecting in a pause and then continuing the conversation. All of these collaborative skills are assessed in the Cambridge speaking tests under the analytical scale interactive communication. We're now going to watch a short clip of two candidates, Anna and Giallo, doing the collaborative part of the Cambridge English First speaking test. Just to remind you, Cambridge English First, or FCE, is at B2 level. In this part of the test, the candidates are given a decision-making task based on a series of pictures and talk together for about 3 minutes. In this task, the instructions are, I'd like you to imagine that a local cafe wants to attract more people. Here are some of the suggestions they're considering. First, talk to each other about how successful these suggestions might be, and then decide which two would attract most people. In the task we're going to show you, the pictures were, for example, suggestions such as putting tables outside, showing football matches on TV, being open at night, and having an international menu, as well as several others. We're only going to watch 1.5 minutes of the task, as time is limited today, so we'll pick it up from their discussion of the picture of the tables outside. As you watch, look out for some examples of good collaborative skills, and also what you think Anna and Giallo should work on. You can add your ideas in the text chat box, or you can write down your ideas on paper if you prefer.
This one seems to be good, but the terrace, but maybe if you have a good weather,
Yes, I don't know. You're in Cambridge.
In Cambridge, I think
Yeah.
it's difficult.
I don't know. And then when if you I've just opened a cafe or a bar. Maybe it's not a good idea to put some tables outside. I think it's better to concentrate on music or
Yeah.
other ideas.
Yeah. What do you think about football matches?
It depends on the target that you're interested in, or the target of the public that you're interested in. I mean, if you're interested in
Sports.
if you're interested in attract men, it's more than good. It's a perfect idea, but I don't know. You can tell. I mean, will you go in a cafe with football match?
Me not, but most of the people, I think
Okay.
maybe it's a good idea. And
Open at night. I don't think in the beginning. Do you agree with me?
it's difficult, a cafe at night, I think.
Yes, I mean it depends until when, but this is, I think, also it's important.
International menu, yeah, to attract lots of people from different countries. Yeah, I think so. But I think the one that would attract more people, the most people, I think, is the place where you can watch TV. Football matches or sports, because lots of people are interested in that, and maybe the coffee free.
Yeah,
It's also very important.
yeah, completely agree.
Young people who has not lots of money. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about television. I think that when you begin, maybe it's better to put like some comfortable sofas.
Yeah.
Because I think that it's not a good idea to give from the beginning you can say an example of your cafe.
Thank you.
So thank you for all your comments. Yeah, some really interesting things there. Just to say that we're only looking at collaborative skills today. Some of you have mentioned their grammar and vocabulary and discourse management. Obviously, these are all areas which are tested as well, but that's not something that we're actually looking at in the seminar today. So let's now have a look at some of the good examples of collaborative skills in this part of the test, and also at what these candidates could improve on. Let's start by looking at a transcript of one part of their test. In this section, both candidates show very good collaborative skills. I'll just give you a second to have a look at that. As you can see, Anna introduces another aspect of the topic, which is the terrace. And Jello picks up on her reservation about the weather to make a personal comment, which she agrees with. Jello then expresses a reservation about the idea for a new cafe and moves on to another aspect of the topic, which is music, and which again is a very good skill to develop, just that sort of moving on. In terms of improvement, Anna could have developed the topic a bit more by asking Giallo why he thought having tables outside was not such a good idea for a new cafe. But actually both candidates interact very well together in this extract. In this second extract, just have a look at that one. Both candidates here show good turn-taking skills. Anna asks Giallo a question to move on to a different aspect of the topic. What do you think about football matches? And Giallo qualifies his opinion and relates it back to the task of attracting more people to the cafe, which is a good collaborative skill. Anna shows good interactive listening when she finishes his sentence, sports, even though this is not quite what he wanted to say. Anna could improve here by elaborating on her own opinion about whether this would be a good way for the cafe to attract more people, as then she would show her ability to develop the topic further. In fact, Giallo is stronger, definitely stronger in this aspect of collaborative skills. Both candidates are good here though at turn taking, and neither interrupted the other. Have a look at this third extract. This one is taken from towards the end of the collaborative task, where the candidates attempt to negotiate towards an outcome by focusing on the second part of the task, which was decide which two would attract most people. This collaborative skill of negotiating towards an outcome is also assessed in the speaking test under interactive communication. And as you can see here, Anna draws a conclusion and makes two suggestions with reasons for each. And Giallo listens with interest, shown by his body language and verbal indications of agreement, and then responds to her decisions by agreeing with her about one point, but disagreeing and making his own decision about the other, again backed up with a reason. So by analysing these extracts from the task, we can identify some of the collaborative skills they used and see how they developed the topic, took turns successfully, and used speaker nomination and interactive listening skills to deal with this task. And just to summarise that both of them were at the FCE level in collaborative skills, with Giallo probably a little bit stronger than Anna. So looking more generally now at your own students, how do you think you can help them to develop these collaborative skills? What kinds of things have you used to do this? Please type some of your ideas into the text chat box now to share some of those with other people. Okay, yeah, lots of good ideas there. Role plays, interviews, using videos, peer discussion. Yep, lots of good things there. And we've also come up with some ideas, obviously, that you can use. One of the things which you can do with your students is what we've just done, which is to analyse a clip, either a clip from a Cambridge ESOL speaking test, like that one of Anna and Giallo, or you could record your students doing the same or similar activities for them to analyse their own language. And you can use the clips to analyse strengths and areas to work on, and also to identify what language would be useful to practice, and to raise awareness of skills which your students need. We're going to take a look at some activities, a couple of activities from the speaking test preparation pack for Cambridge First, which includes a DVD of Anna and Giallo's complete test, and lots of activities for students to use. And there are quite a lot more ideas in the pack as well. Remember, the tasks we're looking at there are aimed at students at the same level as Anna and Giallo, but they can of course be adapted for lower or higher levels. This activity, for example, could be used after the students have watched the full clip of Anna and Giallo doing the task. Once the students have taken notes, they can discuss how each candidate could have improved their performance and what their strengths and weaknesses were. They can note down examples of the language used for each skill, turn taking, initiating discussion, asking for and giving opinions, and concluding or summarising, and then compare them with their own and your suggestions. For example, looking at the third line in the table, what language do you think that Anna or Giallo or your own students could use to ask for and give opinions? Please type your ideas in the text chat box now. Good, yeah, lots of useful phrases there for asking for opinions and responding to opinions. And here are some expressions which we have come up with. And this is a box which is taken from a table in the speaking test preparation pack, where there's a list of useful language for this and other language areas, which shows the type of language you may wish to practice with your students in preparation for the test. It's important to note, however, that although these types of lists are useful for teaching, there aren't any definite lists of language that students should or shouldn't be using in the Cambridge speaking tests. We expect them to use language appropriate to the level and the task. Here's another activity from the speaking test preparation pack, which shows some more ways of developing collaborative skills in the classroom. This activity asks students to think of questions to ask their partner on different topics. Which of the interactive skills do you think this could help with most? Choose from the poll buttons: A, for initiating discussion, B, for giving views and opinions, C, for developing topics, and D, for collaborative turn-taking. Okay, and a really interesting spread there, in fact. Well, we felt that the answer was mostly A, initiating discussion, but of course this kind of task can help your students to work on other areas too. So to summarise, in the webinar today, we've given you an overview of speaking tests formats, explored some of the research done in the area of paired speaking tests, and shared some ideas for practical activities to use in the classroom to prepare your students for taking the Cambridge speaking tests. We hope you enjoyed the webinar and found it useful. Okay, well, welcome back. We've just been having a look through your questions, and there are some really interesting ones in there. So I think Evelyn is going to answer a few questions about the research side, first of all.
Yes, some questions came back about background variables and the effect of background variables, and I agree with you, this is a very important issue, and what I would say is that they could play a role, but that's what happens in real life interaction. The way we deal with this is by having different task types. So in the first certificate of English exam, for example, there's only one task which is paired, and so that minimizes the effect of those variables. But again, being able to deal with interaction with another human being is an important aspect of your language proficiency, so we think that's important to test, but we limit it in case it disadvantages some people to just having one task of that paired nature. And so really at the end it comes to those variables, I think, play a limited role, and it's really about language proficiency. I think that's what the test is really tapping into.
Okay, there's a question here which is, what happens if a candidate speaks too much and doesn't allow the other one to respond? Well, the examiners are trained to deal with this, and there are aspects of the test which allow the examiners to draw one candidate out more than the other. So particularly after the collaborative task, there's a section where the examiner directs questions at the candidates, either both of them together or one or the other. And if one candidate hasn't spoken enough, then they will direct the questions at that candidate to draw that candidate out and elicit some more language. So this is part of obviously what we try and do as a language assessment body to make it fair for everybody.
If I can just, I'll take another question about body language. There was somebody asking, what about the role of body language? We do not assess for body language. Our interactive communication scale does not mention body language at all. And so really the focus is just on knowledge and interactive communication. However, I should say that you need to train your students to be able to show some collaborative body language. So for example, just looking at your partner when they're talking is much better than looking at the table. So that's not assessed, but I think it's an important skill for them to develop.
And there's just another one here, which are two questions actually, which are about the same thing. How critical is completing the tasks compared to the language used in communication? And also in FCE collaborative task, do they lose marks if they don't come to an agreement or decision? So they're both asking the same question really. And the answer is no, they don't lose any marks. We are assessing the language that they produce. And in a holistic way, if they don't come to a decision in the 3 minutes, it's not a problem at all. They've produced the language which, in terms of discussing the task, and that's absolutely fine. So, although obviously, you know, if they can come to a conclusion, it's good. Because it shows that they can produce a more variety of interactive language, but it's not a problem if they don't.
Okay, there was another question about two assessors. We've been talking about paired format with two candidates. Whether you have one or two assessors is a separate issue. That's about how many marks your candidates are going to receive. In Cambridge, a lot of our tests are a 2 and 2 format, 2 candidates and 2 assessors. And if you can have 2 assessors, that is always much better than 1 assessor. However, you can still have a paired format and just 1 assessor. The two things are not mutually exclusive.
And finally, just to mention that today we've just been looking at interactive communication, but there are all the other parts of the test as well, of which are assessed: the pronunciation, vocabulary, and discourse management. So thank you very much. That's all we have time for today. And remember, there's a forum where you can post any further questions you have after this webinar. We look forward to seeing you at our future webinars, and the next webinar is on learning-oriented assessment. Thanks very much and goodbye.